So David reigned over all Israel, and David administered justice and righteousness for all his people. Joab, the son of Tzruya, was over the army, and Jehoshaphat, the son of Achilud, was recorder. Tzadok, the son of Achituv, and Achimelech, the son of Abiatar, were priests, and Seraiah was secretary. Benaiah, the son of Yehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Pelethites, and David's sons were chief ministers. After establishing his rule in Jerusalem, we have a short list of David's cabinet, David's government and administration. And it's interesting to see that how David divided the responsibility among his high officials. Joab, his cousin, is now the commander of the army, the chief of staff if you want. And then we have another administrator who is going to be like the palace herald. And the two priests, Tzadok the son of Achituv, and Abiatar, the son of Achimelech, the only remnant from the family of priests that Saul murdered in the city of Nob. It's interesting to see that David has two priests. One is Abiatar, the son of Achimelech from Nob, who is now like the advisor of David, and every time that David needed to get the consultation or to consult with God by using the ephod, Abiatar is going to do it for him. The other priest, Tzadok, the son of Achituv, the name Tzadok is very interesting in the history of Jerusalem, because we have two very famous figures in the early history of Jerusalem who bear in their names the same element of the word tzedek, which means justice. The first one that I refer is Melchizedek, the king of Salem, the local king that received Abraham with wine and bread after he defeated the foreign armies that kidnapped his nephew Lot. And the other one is Adoni-Tzedek, like the Lord of Justice, who is the ruler of Jerusalem in the time of Joshua, the king of Jerusalem that Joshua defeated, as we read in the book of Joshua. So it's interesting to see that we have this element of tzedek, tzadok, in the name of the rulers and the priests of Jerusalem in its history. And therefore, we can see that maybe David is incorporating into his cabinet, into his administration, also foreign elements that were here in Jerusalem, in Jebus, before it was conquered by him. The story of the scribe of David, who is in this list in the chapter 8 of the second book of Samuel, is known as Seraiah. We find him maybe again in a later list of the cabinet of David that we find in the last part of the second book of Samuel in chapter 20, and there we find Joab was over the whole army of Israel, and Benaiah, son of Yehoiada, was over the Kerethite and the Pelethites, and Adoram was over the forced labor, and Jehoshaphat was the son of Achilud, was the recorder, and Sheva was scribe, or Shva was scribe, and Tzadok and Abiatar were priests. And Ira, the Yairite, was also a priest to David. Here we see that the name of the scribe is not Seraiah, but it is Sheva. And in another list in the book of
Chronicles, his name is Shisha or Shausha. When we find a name in the Bible that appears in different parts, in different forms, it probably is a foreign name that the biblical scribes had a problem to understand it. And there is a very, very, let's say, logical idea or theory that maybe this scribe was a foreign element that was in the administration of David in Jerusalem. So maybe that David incorporated into his government also foreign elements in the maybe local administration that was here in the country, in Jerusalem, in Jebus, before he conquered it. So we see that maybe the scribe, and there is a logical idea that maybe the scribe who probably has a foreign name was part of the former administration in Jerusalem that David incorporates into his own administration. The same goes for the special unit of the Kerethites. Maybe the name Crete is hiding here, and also the Pelethites, maybe Philistines. Remember that in his early career, David is in Gath, and there he actually has is forming a unit of mercenaries, foreign mercenaries, that are going now to escort him, and is going to be a loyal element of him, even in a time of crisis when he has to flee from Jerusalem during the rebellion of Absalom. And we see that this special unit is commanded by one of David's heroes, Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada. So again, an interesting phenomena to see how David is slowly building his administration, his power in Jerusalem as part of the formation of the early monarchy in Israel and Judah. So in this list we see how very interesting phenomena, how David is incorporating into his administration, his cabinet, people that are probably from foreign origin. The scribe maybe was a scribe that was in the administration of Jerusalem, of Jebus, before it was conquered. We find here also the special unit of mercenaries that were formed by David when he was in Philistia, in the Philistine city of Gath, the Kerethites and the Pelethites, probably bearing the name of Crete, the island of Crete, and maybe of the Philistines. So these are special units of mercenaries that are loyal to David, and they are going to be with David even in the time of crisis when he had to flee from Jerusalem and leave it during the rebellion of his son Absalom. So the Kerethites and the Pelethites are commanded by Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, one of David's heroes. Another interesting person that we find in the later list that we just read is the name of Adoniram, or Adoram, who was responsible for the taxes and the forced labor. He's going to be a key person later on in the time of Solomon and his son Rehoboam. So we see that at a certain moment there is a need in the administration also to have a functionary who is responsible for collecting the taxes and be responsible for all the labor work and the royal building projects that were here in Jerusalem and in the kingdom of David and later his son Solomon. Behind me you can see another landmark in the landscape of modern Jerusalem, the famous King David Hotel, which was built by the British during the British Mandate in the 20s and in the 30s, the place where every real VIP, when he comes to Jerusalem, a king or the President of the United States, will come and stay in the presidential suite. Also, the famous hotel in Jerusalem is named after the famous hero who was actually the first one to give the significance to the holy and the historical city of Jerusalem. Then David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. The days that David reigned over Israel were 40 years. 7 years he reigned in Hebron, and 33 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And Solomon sat on the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was firmly established. I'm standing here on Mount Zion, on the western hill of Jerusalem, outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, south of the Armenian and Jewish quarters. In this compound lies a very interesting building. The most ancient part of it can be seen here with those massive blocks, and around it later buildings. This is the compound where two important sites are located. The first one is the tomb of David, and the second one, on the second story of this building, hall which commemorates Jesus' Last Supper on Thursday evening when he and the disciples celebrated the Passover meal in Jerusalem. The history of this compound is very interesting. The thing is, how come that David's tomb is identified here on the western hill, which is, again, outside the boundaries of the city of David, Jerusalem, in the time of King David? And we just read in the second, or the beginning of the book of Kings, that David, after he died, he was buried in the city of David. How come that we have the location of his tomb right over here inside this complex? Well, the earliest evidence that locates the tomb of David here, we find it only in the 12th century by a famous Jewish pilgrim, Rabbi Benjamin from Tudela in Spain, who came here and tells us a very, very interesting story about the building of a church here, initiated by the local Christian patriarch. And when two of his workers found by chance a very, very interesting cave, and when they entered inside, they saw that it was all filled with golden treasures, and in the center of it they saw a bed, and on it lay the body of not less than King David himself. Once they realized where they are, they heard a terrible cry, and a wind chased them out of the cave, and after that the patriarch ordered to seal the cave. From this legend we have the tradition that was evolved here later on, which finds the tomb of David right here inside one of the rooms of this building that you see over here. In recent years, after a small archaeological dig that was taken place here, Amit Re'em from the Israel Antiquities Authority found remains that indicate that this building was built already in the late 4th century, and probably is part of a very big and important church that was built here in Jerusalem in the Byzantine period, which was named Hagia Zion, which means Holy Zion. This church is also found in the famous mosaic floor that was found in Madaba in Transjordan, which describes the Holy Land, a map of the Holy Land, and in the center of it, Jerusalem. And one of the most prominent churches inside the Holy City is Hagia, the Church of Hagia Zion, which was built
right over here. The name Zion, as we remember, started in the city of David as the name of the citadel that was conquered by David, and later on Mount Zion is the name of Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, north of the city of David, but in the Byzantine period, because very important events that took place here and traditions that were developed here, for example, the Last Supper of Jesus with the disciple, the place, the home of Caiaphas, the high priest in Jerusalem where Jesus was arrested, and also the core of the community of the disciples of Jesus and Mary that were living here, and also the event of the Pentecost that all took place in this area. And therefore, the western hill of Jerusalem eventually was sanctified, and the name Zion now is referring to this area until today. The fact that in this compound we find the tomb of David, although probably not historical, because according to the Bible we have to look for the tomb of David in the area of the city of David, in the eastern hill of Jerusalem, which is southeast of where we are located now. The fact that we have here the location of the tomb of David together with the very important events that took place here in the time of Jesus and after the resurrection and his ascension to heaven made this place very important both for Jews and Christians. Already in the Middle Ages, after the Crusader period, the Franciscan monks established their first monastery exactly here where we are standing. The open yard, which is surrounded by arches where I'm standing now, is actually a remnant of the first monastery that was established by the Franciscan Catholic monks here in the Holy Land, and that was the core of their activity as the keepers of the holy site in the Holy Land. At a certain moment in the late Middle Ages, this became a place of dispute between Jews and Christians over who actually owns it, because everybody wants to own David and also the relations that are related to him. This is the time also to mention that in one of the Gospels we find actually that it was important to show that Jesus is actually a descendant from Jesus, because the concept of the Messiah in Judaism is actually that the Messiah is a descendant of the line of the dynasty of David. So therefore the image of David was established here, and it was very, very important and became a matter of dispute between two of the Abrahamic religions. In the early Ottoman period, in the 16th century, this dispute ended with the fact that the Muslims chased away the Franciscans and also prevented the Jews from coming here, and now it became a holy site. Therefore, the second floor, where we find the cenaculum, which means the hall of the Last Supper, which was eventually probably part of the later Crusader church that was built here on the ruins of the Hagia Zion Byzantine church. Eventually, when the Muslims decide that this is going to be their holy site, they convert the holy Christian building above us, and now it becomes a mosque, but a mosque that is dedicated to David. And David, following the Muslim tradition, is actually one of the line of prophets, the man of God that received the words of God, and therefore he is also venerated and is regarded as a holy man among other men of God and prophets in the lineage that eventually ends with the Prophet Muhammad. So if you want, we have this side, the tomb of David and the hall of the Last Supper, a kind of microcosmos that actually give us the idea how the figure of David eventually became so important in the three monotheistic religions, and everybody claims that he owns David, and of course if he owns David, he owns Jerusalem. The importance of Jerusalem, the significance of Jerusalem starts in the time of David, of course.